this because there is something in this text that yanks on me in terms of where we are as a congregation and where we are as a community. You remember that during the diaspora, not everybody went back to Jerusalem. You remember that there were people who, rather than make their way back to the old city, made a decision that they would live in the place of their exile because things had settled for them in their captivity, and going back home was no longer an option. You remember that Nehemiah was a cupbearer serving in the palace of the king. Nehemiah has, in captivity, ascended to a place of prominence, prestige, and political power. You remember that in the book of Esther, there were some people who made a decision that they would not return back to Jerusalem. They decided to remain located in the land called Babylon. Similarly, in the 1960s, there was a pan-African, sort of African nationalist movement that wanted most African Americans to make their way back to Africa. And many African Americans had decided that here now in the land of their captors, having found jobs in manufacturing, retail, and finally moved up the economic ladder, that those options were no longer viable for them. That they had made a decision to remain in the land of their captivity. Nehemiah has led a group that's made a decision to go back. No one can argue about the decision to return to a place that is so broken, so decimated, so damaged, so beyond repair. I mean, think of it. They are now going back to a place that is completely destroyed and must start all over again. I'm submitting to you that something has happened to our own communities. Something has happened in the land in which we live here. Something has happened in the city of Coatesville and beyond, in Philadelphia and D.C. Something has happened to the communities in which we now occupy, in which they are now decimated, destroyed, broken. Homes are fractured. Men act like boys, and boys try to pretend they're men. We have feminized men and masculinized women. We have deficits in terms of our education. We have deficits in terms of our economy. We are broken, 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 and somebody has got to make a decision that rebuilding the wall is significant, that staying and sticking and doing what God says do is worthwhile. Somebody has to make a decision that everybody just can't leave. Somebody has to be willing to go back into the place where they have come out of and provide a difference for the people of God so that God can be honored and glorified there. You know, when I was on my way to church this morning, I was remembering, I was thinking, and I realized this is not true for all of you, but it's true for me. Because when I got into my car this morning, I was able to push a button that heats my seat. Now, I'm not advocating materialism, all right? If you walk to church, just keep trusting God. But I pushed the button and my seat got warm. And I remember when the only way I could get heat, we lived in an apartment and the landlord determined when he turned that on. And we used to open the oven in order to heat parts of the room and get close to the oven so we could get dressed. You don't know what I'm talking about. And so I was reflecting while sitting on my heated seat how good and gracious God had been, not forgetting where I've come from and remembering that everybody's not there. And that is not enough for one of us to make it until everybody is making it. I didn't plan to say all this, but I hope you hear me. There's an election in November, and you better remember some of this. Because there are people who are not for you. And there's something about this idea of how we need to come together in order to rebuild and to refurbish and revitalize and reinvigorate those environments out of which we have come. And so whenever there is this commitment to actualize or realize the dream that God has given, it requires a collective effort. It requires people to come together inside this text. Verse 1 says that Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the walls. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan army officers, "What does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they are doing? Do they think they can build the wall in a single day by just offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something of the stones from a rubbish heap, and charred ones at that?" And notice that one of the first things that happens when you are attempting to resurrect a dream, build a dream together, is that there is always going to be a kind of cold criticism and opposition to your task. If you are expecting everybody to get on board with what you want to do, with what you're trying to become, with what you're trying to restore by way of community or in your personal initiatives, you can forget it. Whenever you are engaged in doing something that will ultimately honor God, you must always accept the fact that there will be criticism and there will be opposition. In fact, the opposition in the text is unique in that there are no arrows that are being shot. There are no rocks that are being thrown. There are no catapults that are being hurled. All of the opposition in this text is psychological. What it is a kind of psychological ridicule that says you are nothing, you will never be nothing, and you can't do anything. That's why the emphasis in the text is on they. Who do they think they are? Who do they think that? What do they think they'll rebuild? The emphasis is on them as a collective. And what psychological warfare always does is go after the area in which you think you are weak, and then elevate it, amplify it in order to tell you you can't get anything done. They know they are feeble. They know they don't have weapons. They know they have been nomadic. They know they have been in exile. They know they have been captive. They know they don't have political clout. They know they don't have muscle, but they know they got a God on their side. And when you know that you've got a God on your side, if he be for me, it doesn't matter who is against me. I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Nobody can tell you what you can do when you know who's on your side. You forgot where you come from. We've come this far by faith, not leaning on our education, not leaning on our economic clout, but leaning on the Lord. There's always somebody trying to ridicule you and tell you what you can't do. And the way the enemy does it is he works insidiously to get at the arena in which you already feel you are weak, in order to tell you you ain't nothing and you ain't ever gonna be nothing. And you got to learn how to gravitate toward the things of God and look back at the enemy and say, don't buy it. I ain't buying it. I know who I am and I know whose I am. I know who brought me this far. I know he promised he would never leave me nor forsake me, no matter what the circumstances look like. There is this opposition. There was always this kind of cold criticism when you make a decision that you are going to work towards the fulfillment of a dream that God has called us to fulfill. There's something else here, though, that I don't want you to miss, because I want you to recognize his response here inside verse 4. He says, then, verse 4, then I prayed, hear us, O our God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. He says, do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders. And at last, the wall was completed to have its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. Listen, you've got to learn how to respond to negative criticism with the same kind of weaponry that Nehemiah used. You don't fight fire with fire. You don't go tit for tat. You learn how to pray. You learn how to go to a God that's got the heart of your supervisor in his hand. You learn how to go to a God who's got the district manager's heart in his hand. You go to a God who can do anything but fail. You don't have to turn your attention horizontally when you've got horizontal problems. You go vertical. You lift your eyes up to the hills from whence cometh your help. Realizing that my help comes from the Lord. He decides that he won't go anywhere else but to the Lord with his issue. And I'm telling you, that's the only place to run. I'm glad there is this refuge. I'm glad that we have prayer as this kind of primary weapon, not as a last resort. There are people who talk like, well, there's nothing I can do now but pray. No, brother, no, sister, you should have done that first. You should make prayer your primary weapon. You can't just run to God when you get in trouble. You got to have developed an ongoing conversation, an online, ongoing discussion with God through the good days so that when the bad days come, all you do is keep doing what you already been doing. This is not reactionary. This is not some knee-jerk. This is Nehemiah in chapter 4 using prayer as a primary weapon to deal with the opposition. And whenever you come to this point in your life where you are trying to discern, Lord, which way do I go? How do I engage? Prayer has got to be the primary feature. But prayer is not the only feature, because there are some people who think all they got to do is just pray. And I'm here to tell you, if all you do is just pray and don't vote, you will have the same hell you have always had. You have to learn not just to pray, but also to persevere. You say, Williams, is that in the text? Yeah, they prayed and then they commenced to work. Some of y'all spend too much time praying and not enough time working. If all you do is pray, but you don't get up and do nothing, ain't nothing gonna change. You got to find a way to put feet to your prayers and get involved in activities that help make your prayers meaningful. Pray all you want, but if you don't fill out that job application, ain't nobody gonna call you. You got to get up and go do it. You got to take a different mentality that says, with God, if God is for me, it doesn't matter who's against me. And if I got to fill out 55 job applications, somebody gonna give me a call. Somebody said, well, then ain't nobody calling. Then start considering how to build your own business. Make biscuits and sell them. Put together your own house cleaning gig. Work for yourself, but do something and stop praying. Because there comes a time when it ain't prayer time, it's persevering time. He recognizes that there's some stuff that Olivia Pope can't fix. You need a God to get at it. And they moved from prayer to perseverance. It's in the text. After they got done dealing with the issue, at last, verse 6, the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. King James says, for the people had a mind to work. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, Ammonites and Ashdodites heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired, they were furious. They all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. Somebody said, I thought every Christian was a pacifist. No. You got to learn how to protect yourself. You got to learn how to do for yourself what nobody else is willing to do. You got to stop asking people to do for you and do for yourself what nobody else will do for you. Insulate your mind, insulate your heart, and protect yourselves in ways that you don't ask other people to do for you. You do it for yourself. They move from just prayer to perseverance and to protection, all under the auspices of a God that was moving them to work and develop a revitalization project in their community. You say, well, there's nothing sacred about building a wall. That's because there is always a God who is working in ways in which we don't always understand. We have created a sacred secular divide that does not exist in biblical writ. There is no such thing as a sacred and secular cosmos. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, and they that dwell therein. God doesn't have sections where he's not involved and sections where he is involved. He is involved in all of it because he is God, the creator of everything seen and unseen. There are no off-limit areas for God. If it is, then God is in it. God is around it. God is a part of it. And we've got to see a God who is in everything. Which is why our easy ability to step out of stuff is not at all close to what God calls us to be in the Bible. I was talking to someone, they were sort of ridiculing my sort of, my political initiative, my sense of policy and politics as a part of my faith. And I was trying to question them, tell me, why would God then create government for us to stay out of it? Why would God create a system in which he didn't want us to participate in it in order to redeem it for his glory? And the problem with most Christians in Dan Williams' view is that they have this mentality of sacred and secular. And there are some things that we just can't get in. Why? Because we're too spiritual. And when you think like that over a period of years, you end up with a void there where the voice of God is not present because the people of God are not present. That's why the media controlled in your country is run by 6 corporate monopolies. Who control the airwaves and feed you what they want you to believe. It's why raw, unregulated capitalism is destroying us from the inside out. Somebody said to me, well, I don't want regulations as a businessman on my business. And I said to him, regulations and rules ain't for saints, they for sinners. And since God can't trust you to do what's right, and neither can I, we need regulation. Because if left to yourself, your own greed will consume people like me. And I need you to know you can't walk all over me, so we need regulations. There is this movement in this arena to persevere and to do for themselves without asking anybody else to do it. This is about self-actualization and an understanding of where we need to go. And it doesn't happen without a team. Can I give you one more point before I get to this? Listen, I was listening to John Hope Bryan, and he was giving an illustration of a young boy who was a part of his economic training pool in his school. And he had 3 young men. Young folks, you need to hear this. 3 young men. And what he did was he decided that as he watched them growing in the classroom, that he would test them. So he gave each of them $75. And said, tell me what you want to do with your $75. And there was one boy who, through the course of events, had been coming to class, listening to his strategies, and suddenly he began to dress differently. He stopped wearing his pants at the base of his behind. He started pulling his pants up, and he started coming in with a jacket and a shirt. And one day he happened to come in with a tie. And they asked him, well, why'd you do it? He said, I just felt like I wanted to look like a guy who was concerned for investment. This is a teenager. And John gives to the 3 of them, he gives them $75. And the 2 boys started to ridicule the other boy who had changed his thinking and his dress. And they started to tell him, man, you look corny. You look like this. You look like that. You know the way young folks can do. And so he gave them all $75. And 2 of the guys, he said, what are you going to do with yours? The 2 guys who ridiculed him said, we're going to take our money and we're going to buy a pair of Nikes. We're going to get some more money, add to it, and we're going to get a pair of Nikes. And they were talking about the different colors, the blue and the green and the black. And they were talking about the different styles of Nikes that they were going to buy. He asked the other fellow who had finally started to understand this sort of renewed mentality. And he said, what you going to do with your $75? He says, I'm going to buy one share of Nike stock. The teacher began to talk to the other two and try to tell them, no, you shouldn't go buy more sneakers. You shouldn't buy more sneakers. And the young man who was going to buy the stock said, no, teach, let them. I want them to buy more. Do you understand what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to change the way you think in order to recognize how to protect yourself and build something that will outlast yourself. Nehemiah has pushed them to the brink and recognized that there's a God who is working for them in the midst of the opposition. And whenever you decide to do that, not only will you find opposition against you, but you'll find a God that works for you. But you'll also find a need to be aware of what's happening externally as well as internally, because sometimes the internal opposition is worse than the external. External opposition always clarifies internal weakness. So you really don't know what's in you until you've been pressed. That's why pressure becomes a good thing. You say, how is that true? Look at verse 10, because in this text, it says, then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired, and there is so much rubble to be removed. But we will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before they know what's happening, we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. Verse 12, the Jews who live near the enemy came and told us again and again they will come from all directions and attack us. It's one thing to understand people who are on the outside trying to destroy you. But when the destruction and the opposition is coming from people on the inside, see, you can handle the Sanballat. But these folks were from Judah. These were other Jews. And when the opposition is from the outside and the inside, you really got a problem then. Because the only way the dream can work is when the team is working together. And sometimes the enemies you have to fight are not outside, they're inside. There are those days when people who you think are your friends have a different kind of agenda because they've been co-opted by folks on the outside. You've got to learn how to read between the lines and recognize that just because they look like you don't necessarily mean they're your friends. It is easier to handle external opposition than it is internal opposition. And sometimes the work that is required is double the work. You say, Williams, how do you know that? Because inside the text, there is a double duty that they must accomplish. You say, how is that? You see, they're not just rebuilding the wall. You see, they got to remove the debris in order to rebuild. See, the only way you can rebuild some stuff is by getting rid of some other stuff. And if you don't get rid of the other stuff, you can't rebuild the way you need to rebuild. You see, the good news about God is that God will use in the rebuilding process stuff you looked at and called it rubbish. Because the rubbish inside the stone wall, all of it wasn't trash. There was some stuff that looked like trash, but it really was treasure. Because when God gets done taking your trash and polishing up your trash and putting it back together again, God takes the trash of your life. Lord, I wish I had a witness. He takes the rubbish of your life and puts it back together again so that when that wall goes up, you can look at it and say, nobody but God. God took the brokenness of my life, the fractured pieces of my life, the messed up arenas of my life, and he put it back together again, refurbished it, and now it looks brand new, and I can walk on it. stand on it. That's why you ought not be ashamed of your testimony. You ought to tell somebody where God brought you from, because if it had not been for that trash, you might not have got to your treasure that God says now elevates and highlights who I am. Do I have a witness anywhere? That's why you ought to tell your story so he can get the glory. Cut it out with this shut mouth grace. Tell him, yeah, I used to be this and that and this and that, but look at me now. By his power, I've been raised to another level. By his grace, I've been brought up out of the muck and the mire. Thanks be to God for his unspeakable gift. Listen, I am done with this, but I can't sit down unless I tell you one more story. Because you see, when you're getting rid of some stuff and you're building something because of who God is, you got to realize that God uses those messed up, charred, burned stones of your life in order to help make you open to what he's trying to do. I was looking at baseball pictures the other day. I was reading. I have this thing about looking at sports in order to get illustrations to talk to you. And I found out that pitchers take baseballs and they scuff them up so that the new ball is not what they want. They don't want brand new balls. You see them cheating, pulling sweat out of their bands and taking a ball and rubbing it in the dirt because they realize that a brand new ball they can't control. When a ball's been scuffed up, when a ball's been made dirty, pitchers say, then we got better control of the ball. You know why you went through what you went through? God was scuffing you up because he realizes that when you've been scratched and scuffed and some dirt gets on you, then he's got a better ability to control you and place you wherever he wants to place you and use you for his glory. The dream works when the team works. And listen, I don't know who's on your squad, but whoever's on your squad, you need one more player. You know why LeBron is in Cleveland now? Because they decided if we get LeBron, we can build around him and put together a championship team. I came to tell you this morning, I don't need LeBron. I need another king. It ain't King James. I need the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And when he's on your squad, your dream is assured, because the only team you need is made up of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And when you got that kind of team, you can't lose with that kind of squad. Is there anybody here that says, I got a dream? Anybody here that needs a team? I'm giving you one player who can make the difference in a no-win season and a winning season. His name is Jesus, Lily of the Valley, bright and morning star. He walks with me, talks with me, and tells me I am his own. Is there anybody here that loves my Jesus? Anybody here that loves my Lord? I want to know. That's the God we serve. And it can change the direction of your life forever. Forever. He can make the difference in how you handle opposition. He can make the difference in how you persevere. He becomes the source of your protection. And God can enable you to move through whatever you've got to pass through. You want to trust him. If you love the Lord, go on and appreciate him. Let him know that you love him.